It was a clear, brisk morning when I found myself boarding a first-class flight to San Francisco. The airport was bustling, and the energy was high with the anticipation of the day ahead. As I settled into my seat, I was blissfully unaware of the dramatic turn my day was about to take. The seat next to me was soon occupied by a sharply dressed man, his laptop open before we even took off, clearly a man of business. We exchanged polite nods, and I turned my attention to the view from the window, my thoughts drifting to the conference I was headed to. The flight attendants began their rounds, and as the cabin settled, the hum of whispered conversations filled the air. My seatmate, seemingly impatient, flagged down an attendant and started complaining about his seat not reclining fully. His voice was loud enough to turn heads, a touch of arrogance lacing his words as he disdainfully muttered about expectations from first-class service. I tried to focus on my book, but his grumbling grew louder, now punctuated by names dropped like breadcrumbs for eavesdroppers, among them Elon Musk. These tech moguls think they can solve everything. Like that Musk guy. Overrated, just a flashy showman, he scoffed. I felt a twinge of discomfort. Not because I was an ardent supporter of Musk, but the disdain felt misplaced, and the unnecessary loudness seemed to breach the invisible etiquette of airplane travel. However, before I could formulate a response, the atmosphere shifted. From the row behind us, a calm voice interjected, "Excuse me, sir, but I believe you might be misunderstanding the complexities of what people like Mr. Musk are trying to achieve." The voice belonged to a woman in her 50s, her expression composed, her eyes reflecting a well of wisdom and experience. The man beside me snorted, ready to dismiss her, but she continued, "Innovation isn't just about flashy headlines and making money. It's about pushing boundaries, failing, and standing up again. It's about visions that most can barely dream of, let alone criticize so freely." There was a pause, a collective breath held by those around us. The man looked taken aback, his bravado faltering under her measured tones. I saw him as he was then, just another passenger, stripped of the pretense he had wrapped around himself like a cloak. The conversation slowly picked up around us again, the moment passing, but the impact of the woman's words lingered. I turned to thank her, curiosity piqued about her insights. We talked, the flight hours melting away as she shared her experiences working in the tech industry, her brushes with innovation, and the real challenges they faced, tales that were both inspiring and grounding. As we disembarked, the reality of my own judgments and the easy criticisms we often offer without understanding the full story became clearer. What started as an ordinary flight turned into a profound learning experience, one that I would carry with me long after. In the end, this journey wasn't just about reaching a physical destination, but about the perspectives I gained along the way. It reminded me that every person has a story, every opinion a backstory, and every dismissive comment an opportunity to uncover deeper truths. As you reflect on this, consider the last time you judged too quickly, and ask yourself what truths you might uncover if you listened a little closer. As the plane touched down in San Francisco, the impact of the earlier conversation still resonated with me. Stepping off the plane, I carried a newfound curiosity and an eagerness to explore different perspectives. My first destination was the conference, a gathering buzzing with the exchange of ideas and innovations. It was here, amidst panels and presentations, that the unexpected happened. I spotted the woman from the flight engaged in a lively discussion with a group of people. Curious, I approached, only to realize she was speaking with none other than Elon Musk himself. The revelation was startling. The man from the plane, who had so freely criticized Musk, was nowhere in sight, but here was this insightful woman, speaking with Musk as if they were old colleagues. Musk's presence at the conference wasn't a surprise, but the coincidence of this meeting was almost serendipitous. I watched as they discussed potential solutions and innovative ideas, their conversation a vivid illustration of the very points she had made on the plane. It wasn't about ego or fame. It was about the passion for technology and its potential to change the world. I couldn't resist. I approached them during a break, reintroducing myself to the woman and taking the opportunity to meet Musk. He was nothing like the media portrayal that so often highlighted controversy over content. In person, he was focused, thoughtful, and genuinely engaged in the topics at hand. The woman introduced me as the person she had met on the plane, and Musk smiled, acknowledging the small world we lived in. Later, as I walked away from the conversation, my mind buzzed with excitement and inspiration. It was a stark contrast to the flight, where a single perspective had clouded a broader understanding. This incident was a reminder of how interconnected our lives are, and how every encounter has the potential to change perspectives and challenge our views. This experience reshaped my understanding of criticism and admiration. It wasn't just about who was right or wrong, but about the perspectives we choose to see and the openness we have to new ideas. Could it be that often, our criticisms are reflections of our own limitations in understanding? As you think about this, ask yourself, when was the last time you changed your perspective after learning more about the other side? After the conference, I was left with much to ponder. The days that followed were filled with sessions and networking, but my thoughts kept drifting back to the plane incident and the discussions with Elon Musk and the woman. Their words had planted seeds of curiosity and reflection about the impact of technology and the role of leaders in shaping the future. I spent the remaining days of the conference seeking out speakers who challenged the status quo, pushed for ethical innovation, and emphasized the human aspect behind the technology. The conference concluded, and as I packed my bags for the return journey, I felt different. There was a shift in my perspective, a broadening of my understanding. On the flight home, I found myself seated among a diverse group of passengers. This time, instead of tuning out the conversations around me, I listened. The topics varied from technology to personal stories of triumph and struggle, echoing the themes I had absorbed at the conference. The flight back was more than just a return journey. It was a moment of introspection. I reflected on how easily opinions could be formed and how rarely they are challenged. How often do we accept a narrative without digging deeper? How often do we speak without truly understanding the full picture? These questions lingered in my mind as the plane descended towards home. Landing back where my journey began, I carried with me not just souvenirs and business cards, but a collection of life lessons about understanding and empathy. The incident with a man on the first flight, my interactions at the conference, and my subsequent realizations had all culminated in a profound personal transformation. I realized that every encounter, whether it begins with conflict or curiosity, holds the potential to teach us something valuable. As I left the airport, the crisp air felt refreshing, almost symbolic of my renewed outlook. I wondered about the man from the first flight. Did he ever reconsider his words, or was he still somewhere, voicing his criticisms without seeking to understand? This journey taught me the importance of dialogue, of staying open to new ideas, and of the continuous pursuit of knowledge. So, what about you? When was the last time you allowed a single experience to shift your perspective and lead you to a deeper understanding? The days following my return felt like a whirlwind. Work resumed, routines re-established, and yet my mind was restless. I couldn't shake the memory of the flight and the conference, as if they had unlocked something within me. One evening, as I scrolled through social media, I stumbled upon a video. It was a clip from the conference, highlighting some of the discussions about innovation and the future. To my surprise, the woman from the flight was featured prominently, her insights drawing attention and praise in the comments. That same video showed Elon Musk speaking passionately about the responsibility that comes with power and technology. The comments were a mix, some supportive, others skeptical, but one, in particular, caught my attention. It was a comment from someone who sounded eerily like the man from the plane, filled with the same dismissive tone and heavy criticism. I stared at the words, realizing how common it was for people to hide behind anonymity and throw around opinions without consequence. But this time, I didn't feel anger or frustration. Instead, I felt a strange sadness, a sense of how much potential was lost when we focused on tearing down instead of building up. That night, I found myself writing down everything I had experienced during that trip. Not for anyone else, but for myself, to piece together how much that brief encounter had changed me. Writing it down felt cathartic, as if I was turning the scattered thoughts in my mind into something tangible. I thought about how often we let our preconceived notions and biases dictate our actions, and how rarely we pause to question them. The next day, I shared my story with a close friend. As I spoke, I saw her face change. Moments of surprise, laughter, and even a bit of guilt as she admitted how often she found herself making snap judgments. It hit me then. Maybe the best way to change perspectives wasn't through arguments or debates, but by sharing personal experiences. Stories had a way of breaking down walls, of making us see things we might otherwise ignore. I decided to take that idea further. Over the next few weeks, I started conversations with people I wouldn't usually interact with, colleagues I barely knew, strangers at coffee shops, even old friends I had lost touch with. Every conversation opened up a new perspective, a reminder that everyone had their own struggles, dreams, and reasons for believing what they did. And every time, I thought back to the woman on the flight and her calm, composed way of challenging an opinion without belittling the person behind it. It was a lesson I carried with me and tried to practice, even when it was hard. One day, I received an email from the conference organizers, thanking attendees and sharing highlights from the event. Among the photos and quotes, there was one from the woman on the flight. It read, "The future isn't built by tearing each other down, it's built by lifting each other up, one idea, one conversation at a time." Those words stuck with me, a quiet reminder of how much power a single interaction could hold. And I couldn't help but wonder, how many of us would take that power and use it to build instead of break? Months passed, and life moved forward as it always does, but that experience stayed with me. It wasn't just the incident or the people I met, it was the way it changed how I saw the world. One day, while flipping through the news, I stumbled upon an article about a groundbreaking project in renewable energy. It was spearheaded by none other than the woman from the flight, now identified as a leading innovator in her field. I couldn't believe it. The same woman who had quietly defended innovation and ethics was now making headlines for pushing boundaries in ways most of us could only dream of. Reading that article sparked something in me. I realized how easy it was to sit on the sidelines, offering opinions without ever stepping into the arena. It made me question my own contributions, my own role in shaping the future. Was I just a spectator, or was I willing to take risks and do something meaningful? The question lingered in my mind, urging me to take action. That week, I decided to attend a local meetup for entrepreneurs and innovators. Walking into that room was intimidating at first. Everyone seemed so confident, so driven, and I wondered if I even belonged there. But as the evening unfolded, I found myself drawn into conversations with people from all walks of life: engineers, designers, dreamers, each one passionate about their vision for the future. The energy in that room was infectious, and for the first time, I felt like I wasn't just observing from the sidelines. I was part of the conversation. Over the next few months, I started working on a small project of my own. Nothing revolutionary, just an idea I had been toying with for years. It was scary putting myself out there, but it felt right. Every step of the process reminded me of the lessons I had learned on that flight and at the conference. It wasn't about being perfect or having all the answers. It was about trying, failing, learning, and trying again. One evening, as I worked late on my project, I received an email. It was from the woman who had inspired it all. I had reached out after seeing the article about her work, never expecting a reply. But there it was, a thoughtful message thanking me for sharing how much her words had impacted me. She ended the email with a simple but powerful line: "Keep going. The world needs more people willing to listen, learn, and lead with kindness." That message became my anchor on days when I doubted myself. It reminded me of the power of small moments and the ripple effects they can create. And now, as I reflect on everything that has happened since that flight, I can't help but wonder, what if I had stayed silent? What if I had never engaged in that conversation? It's a question worth asking because, in the end, it's the moments we choose to act that shape our stories, and maybe even the world. It was a quiet evening when I found myself reflecting on how much had changed since that flight. The woman's words, her presence, and the chance encounter with Elon Musk had left an indelible mark on me. I realized how much those moments had shaped not just my perspective, but the choices I was making now. I had become more mindful, more curious, and, most importantly, more willing to challenge my own assumptions. But it wasn't just about me. The real impact of those lessons was in how I was starting to approach others, listening more, judging less, and trying to build bridges where there had once been walls. One day, while scrolling through social media, I noticed a post from a former colleague who had been struggling with burnout. They had shared a vulnerable, heartfelt story about feeling lost and unsure of their direction. Normally, I might have just liked the post and moved on, but something made me reach out. We ended up meeting for coffee, and as we talked, I found myself sharing my own experience from the flight. It wasn't to preach or give advice. It was just to show them that moments of clarity and change can come from the most unexpected places. By the end of our conversation, they seemed lighter, more hopeful, and I realized how much sharing stories could truly connect us. That same week, I was invited to speak at a local event about innovation and the power of collaboration. I almost declined, feeling unqualified, but then I thought about the woman on the flight. She hadn't hesitated to speak her truth, even in the face of criticism. So, I said yes. Standing in front of that audience was nerve-wracking, but as I spoke about my journey, the lessons I had learned, and the importance of open dialogue, I saw faces light up with understanding. Some nodded, others smiled, and in that moment, I realized I wasn't just telling a story. I was creating space for others to see themselves in it. After the event, a young man approached me, saying my talk had inspired him to rethink his own startup and focus more on collaboration instead of competition. His words struck a chord, reminding me how one conversation, one moment of connection, could create ripples far beyond what we could imagine. It wasn't about grand gestures or monumental changes. It was about the small, consistent actions that added up over time. As I walked home that night, the city lights reflected in the puddles on the street, I couldn't help but feel grateful. Grateful for that flight, for that woman's wisdom, and for the chain of events that had led me here. Life has a funny way of teaching us what we need to learn, often when we least expect it. And as I thought about everything that had unfolded since that day, one question lingered in my mind. How many opportunities do we miss to connect, to learn, to grow, simply because we're too caught up in our own narratives? Maybe the key isn't to have all the answers, but to keep asking the right questions. Years later, that flight still feels like a turning point in my life. It wasn't just about the people I met or the lessons I learned. It was about how those moments kept shaping my choices, even long after they had passed. One evening, while sitting in my home office, I was flipping through an old notebook where I had jotted down ideas and reflections from that time. Among the pages, I found a line that the woman had said, "The real work begins when you stop looking outward for answers and start asking yourself the hard questions." Those words hit me like they were meant for this exact moment. I realized how easy it is to let life pull you along, to get caught up in routines and distractions without stopping to ask if you're really living the way you want to. That night, I sat there for hours, thinking about what mattered most to me, what I wanted to create, and how I wanted to contribute. It wasn't an epiphany or a neatly wrapped moment of clarity, but it was a start. And sometimes, that's all you need. Over time, I started making small changes. I reached out to old friends I had lost touch with, started volunteering at local events, and even joined a book club to meet people outside of my usual circle. Each step felt like peeling back another layer of myself, revealing things I hadn't realized I was missing. The connections I made were deeper, more meaningful, and often filled with stories that inspired me in ways I hadn't expected. One day, while volunteering at a community event, I met a young entrepreneur who reminded me of myself before that flight, eager but hesitant, full of ideas but unsure of where to start. We talked for hours, and as I shared my own journey, I saw a spark of confidence in their eyes. It was a beautiful reminder that sometimes the most valuable thing we can give someone isn't advice or solutions. It's the belief that they're capable of figuring it out themselves. That encounter led me to start mentoring others in my spare time. It wasn't something I had planned, but it quickly became one of the most fulfilling parts of my life. Helping others navigate their own challenges and watching them grow was like seeing the ripples of that flight continue to spread. Every time I shared my story, I saw it resonate in new ways, reminding me of how interconnected we all are. Now, as I sit here reflecting on everything that's happened since that seemingly ordinary flight, I can't help but smile. Life is unpredictable, messy, and often far from perfect, but it's in those unexpected moments that we find the things that truly matter. And as I think back to that day, to the woman who spoke with such wisdom and grace, I realize how much we underestimate the power of a single interaction to change the course of our lives. So, if there's one thing I've learned, it's this: never underestimate the impact you can have, even in the smallest of moments. You might just change someone's world, and your own in the process.